I was born in 76.
And what year or what age were you when you got married?
Yeah,
Okay.
30, almost 31 when I got married. And I was kind of late to the game too. Most of my friends were married when I got married in 2006. So,
Mhm.
they're in their 20s, starting to push close to 25.
You found someone at a pretty reasonable age where if you wanted to have a child, you could have had a child or more than one. Was
That's
there any
correct.
reason why you chose not to? Did you know from the beginning that you were going to be child free?
I have a whole list of reasons. And it actually kind of started as a joke. Just to step back a little, I think to kind of give a picture is when I was young, I am the oldest of four, and I am 10 years the senior for my youngest brother. I was 10 years old when he was born. And he was my little play doll. And I babysat not just him, but in the 80s, people would actually, at 11 years old, people would actually trust you with their children. It seems very foreign today, but
Hmm.
I babysat from the time I was 10 years old until I could get like what I call a real job, at a retail place when I was 16. And then I helped half raise my brother. So I think to some degree, my mother blames herself for the reason I didn't want kids, but it's almost like, yeah, by the time I was 18, it's like, I've been there, done that. So I was kind of always in the no child camp. I have a coworker that I worked with in brokerage
Hmm.
when we were in brokerage, and we actually started a list of reasons not to have children. And the irony of it is that she had children and I never did.
Ah,
I was strongly in the no, and I never wavered. And it's funny because when Carl and I first started dating, he's a few years older, not major, like 4 years older than I am.
okay.
Um, and I remember on our second or third date, he asked me, he's like, do you have interest in having kids? I'm like, oh, here goes that, because how many guys don't want kids? Like, it's very uncommon. Most people generally want kids. So when I was like, well, I want to be honest. So I was like, no, I really don't want kids. And he's like, yeah, me neither. So it ended up working out perfectly that
Right.
way. That neither one of us wanted it. I think had I changed my mind early on, in the first few years, he probably would have been okay with it. But we never had the urge or desire. And as far as why, um, gosh, there's a list. I am selfish, I would say, is probably the primary list. I like my sleeping in on the weekends. I like that I can go to work and come home and not have to deal with any other humans except for myself and my husband.
Hmm.
A lot of it is monetary,
Hmm.
in the sense of it is very, and don't get me wrong, my husband and I make decent money, but when you have kids, it alters your lifestyle. And I was selfish and didn't want that. I want to go to Nordstrom and, buy the fancy shoes, and I want to go on the nice vacations, and I don't want all the shopping I do to have to be for my children. So that a lot of it I would say was selfish in nature. And I look at my friends, unless I have a few friends who have a significant more amount of money than I do, and they have both. They can have both, but that's not something that was possible for us. And I think one of the other reasons too is I always wanted to work, but my mother until later in life was not, until like my younger brother was born, was not an office worker. She was home with us, and I always felt like that was something I would want to do if I ever had kids. But I never really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, so that kind of triggered the not wanting kids as well. So there's not really one reason. There's a multitude of reasons. You know, Previous experience, money, selfishness. Selfishness is probably the primary one. Yeah, and I guess it's just something I realized is like I don't get to have both. I think the other thing was because I had I had three siblings. For me, having an only child wasn't, in my mind, an option. Having grown up with siblings, so it was either zero or two.
Did you get any pushback from family or friends telling you that you were going to change your mind or that you were making the wrong decision? Or did they kind of back off once you and your husband said, this is what we think and this is what we're going to do?
My family and friends, I think I gave them such a heads up because I started talking about no kids long before I got married.
Mm,
I think they all kind of knew.
hmm.
My parents, amazing. They never said a word.
That's great.
My neither were his parents. Both of our families were very supportive of the no kids. In fact, I've got I've got a cousin who doesn't have any children, and and sometimes we talk about like our a difference in our lives versus other people's lives with having children, which is kind of interesting. And I have a lot of friends who are like, for some days they'll be like, oh man, Marlene and Carl made the right decision, when they're kids. But no, my friends have always been super cool. And so has my family. It's just always been great. I've even had people call me and be like, all right, I'm at that point in my life where I have to decide if I want to have kids. What made you decide not to?
Mm.
So I've actually had people call and ask me that, like why I didn't want to rather than why I did.
Are you aware of any of the press happening right now about they're worried about fertility declining so much that we can't be at replacement level and all the tech bros worried about not having enough consumers for their products in 40 years and stuff like that. Does that register to you
It
or do you just kind of dismiss
it
it?
does. It does. I mean, I can say that I've heard about it and read about it. I can't say I've heard about it a ton in the US. I know China has a major issue right now because of their one child policy. And, so I know that they're having, those kinds of issues. But, and I know in the US that there has been declining fertility. But honestly, it never really played much of a role in my thought process.
Hmm.
And maybe that ultimately the decision we made was made almost 20 years ago. And I don't know if that was really a discussion. At that point in time, it was more of a, we don't know how we're going to replace the baby boomers in the workforce because they were twice the size of Gen X.
Hmm.
Um, and it was the conversation of like, we may not, we're going to suffer from dwindling population in the next generation or two.
But then the millennials, there were so many more of them born.
Mm-hmm.
It really
Yep.
seems like for now it's kind of balanced out among working
Mm-hmm.
age
Yeah.
adults.
Mm-hmm. Technology has a way to take over whether you like it or not when there's a missing workforce. If you've got a baby booming population that's dwindling into retirement, but you have technology that can kind of replace their roles, then it's not quite the crisis that it could have been if the technology hadn't advanced to the point where you needed these humans. I think part of it too is the move more towards a service oriented country versus some of the more manufacturing and coal mining and steel and stuff like that we did, that the baby boomers did. So I think technology has really helped balance out the fact that there was at one point a dwindling population. I don't think it ever became the problem they thought it was going to be.
We're going to have to figure out other ways of doing things and other ways of measuring prosperity. And if the population is set to decline around 2080, we're not going to see that. But
Nope.
but
Yeah, we
somebody's
don't.
going to have to be at the helm at that point, and they're going to have to understand that we can't just keep growing. There are so many
No,
reasons why, there's going to be there are environmental reasons, there's health reasons, there's a lot of reasons why the people I'm talking to could not or did not have children. And some of it wasn't voluntary. Sometimes they tried and it just
yeah,
didn't take. And they don't know if it was the result of a medical issue or a health problem or what. And so, we have to zoom out and say, well, if this is what's happening to more and more people, then obviously we're going to have to adjust to different
Hmm.
population, different population
Yeah,
size, generations
yeah.
of different sizes within that picture.
And I do always feel bad for the women who wanted the children and couldn't have them.
Yeah.
Because I just think that's a cruel, cruel thing for Mother Nature to do. But but unfortunately, that happens to a lot of women who have issues.
Do you want to wrap this up by using a word other than selfish to describe your decision?
Oh boy, maybe realistic. I think I knew my limitations,
Hmm.
and of what I could and couldn't handle and or wanted to handle. Um, I think sometimes parenthood and full-time work and life adds a level of complication, several levels of complication that realistically I didn't think I would be good at handling. I know 30 is not super old, but at the time, to me,
Mhm.
it felt like it was. So part of it too was is like, well, but now that it's taken me, quote unquote, this long, like,
Mhm.
don't I want it to just be this way? And then it never got to the point where I changed my mind or we changed our minds. And I think that was part of it too, is that I want to enjoy this. Like, I'm not 22 or 23. Like, some of my friends were in their early to mid 20s when they got married. I was not, and
Mhm.
that's an anywhere from a 6 to 8 year difference in their, in their life cycle, that may have altered, some of the decisions had it been earlier.
Yeah, I think our peak fertility is at age 27.
Mm. Yeah. And most of my friends who had children did it that young.
Hmm.
My sister, she was a little bit older, but not much.
Hmm.
They were all in their 20, 25, 28. I mean, most of them were done by 30. Yeah, and here I was not even married. Like my friend, she actually had her first baby the week I got married.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so here I was getting married and she was 2, 3 years, at least 2 or 3 years ahead of me at that point. And she considered herself old when she got married, because she wasn't 25 or 24 either.
I just know that I remember kind of laughing about hearing that I was at peak fertility and then looking around at my options and thinking I'm not having a child with any of these. You know, like between the guys that I knew in college and the guys I knew at my first professional job, I was like, they're hyper aggressive, they're angry at the
Mm-hmm.
drop of a hat. They're young men. And they seem
Yeah.
kind of scary and off-putting. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna make a child with them, just because
Yeah.
I'm at my fertility peak right now.
Never did it occur to me at 27 or 28 that my biological clock was ticking, because I didn't, even then, I didn't care about it. I never really cared about it. It was fine with me. I mean, truly, it was never something that was really ever discussed. Like, we never sat down and had a conversation of like, did we change our minds?
Hmm.
Like it never really crossed my mind.
That's cool.
And I'm okay with that decision even today, 18 years later, when now it's too late. And my parents, I think they just knew for so long, because I'm very close to my parents. So it was never a secret that
Right.
that wasn't going to happen. And luckily, my sister came along and had two. And then my brother, he's the younger of the four of us. He's 10 years younger than me. So he's just now having babies. He's got a 2-year old. And I had another nephew born a couple weeks ago. So
Congrats.
um, luckily, when you have three other siblings, it really takes the pressure off. I think it's more acceptable now than it even was like 18 years ago when we got married to not
Right.
have kids.